Portugal, there's a YouTube show full of fun facts you need to know.
Hola, bon dia, alegria. Munson here with a Good Morning Portugal show and podcast, and my Substack as well that I'm experimenting with at the moment. If you want to follow me on Substack, there you go, Carl Munson. Ask for me by name there, carlmunson.substack.com. Right, I'm reading this morning from my weekly Portugal resident column. In case you forgot, just over a week ago, and news moves on, doesn't it? It really does. I think this sort of thing, when I was a kid, would have been in the news for a little while. It might have even been in the news for a year, and there might have been a news story about, do you remember, a year ago, the great Iberian power outage? Well, things move on, things get forgotten, and as I say in the opening paragraph of this column, this piece, this article entitled "That Should Never Have Happened," I suspect people will forget and we'll never really know what happened. So let me read this for you now, if I may, with added commentary. Of course, you can read for yourself at the Portugal Resident. It is the current article that they've posted up for me. Wasn't sure if it would be, or how well it would be received, but I guess they can distance themselves, or the editor, hello to you, Inyesh, that you can distance yourself by calling it an opinion piece, which of course it is. Right, whatever that was, I begin, and I suspect we'll never know the true cause. It should never have happened, and yet I predict it will happen again. That which I speak of, although my misgivings this week could be directed at any number of challenges to our well-being in modern society, is what might become known as the Great Iberian Outage of 2025. Now, you'll notice here at the Portugal Resident, when they put articles up on their website, there are links, lots of links. So this is a new website actually for the Portugal Resident, and it's really rather good. So onward then, the sudden and grave loss of grid electricity to the entire country of Portugal, all of neighbouring Spain, parts of France, and other smatterings of electrical shortcoming. Should all of the Iberian Peninsula not be shocking? Don't hold on a minute, let me turn that up. Yes, should that be not shocking enough for anyone to come to terms with? Electricity, sure. Anyway, our peninsula alone, that's Spain and Portugal here, a bit of Andorra as well, I think, isn't it? Is home to over 50 million humans who did their best. If you're reading this in Andorra, please say hi and let me know if that's correct. Who did their best to muddle through this extraordinary situation, which thankfully began in the daylight on a beautiful sunny spring day. I became aware of the fact when a friend in Lisbon called me, before Bobby O'Reilly called me, before mobile comms became near impossible, asking that perennial question, immortalized in our insane times, 50 years ago? What's going on? Marvin Gaye of Motown Gay. For my curious mate, Bobby has me, I think, as his go-to guy when anything out of the ordinary happens here in Portugal. The rapidly emerging and bizarre scenario was an urban meltdown with traffic light failure, a vehicular standstill, and ensuing yet mysterious chaos. I didn't know. It was him who brought it to my attention. I didn't know what was happening. All this just after 11:30 in the morning, when my first sense of it was when we here lost access to the internet. My primary response at that point was to assume the usual, more local loss of power, which I assumed, based on quite recent experience, would be put right fairly quickly. And yeah, we've had a number of outages. One quite long-lasting one that was to do with a fuse or contactor or something like that served the 4 houses, ours included, and 3 neighbours. That took a little while. It was all sorted out it was mysterious. It wasn't like the usual outages where it flickers, goes off, and then comes back on fairly quickly. But so we're not unused to this, but this was, as we discovered, of an altogether different scale. In the absence of my principal tool of my trade, this that I'm using now, a computer linked to the internet, I took the opportunity to walk the dogs, encountering confused neighbours and making the acquaintance of new ones as I progressed up the street towards open space, trees, and that all-important canine relief in the very welcome sunshine of this glorious day. It was the 28th of April, wasn't it? On returning home and realizing the national scale of the incident prompted by my pal, Bobby, I did what I've become accustomed to doing in Portugal when disaster and uncertainty strike, which was to spark up a live stream on YouTube and Facebook. This in an attempt to understand the situation, assist people with information, and offer suggestions to ensure their safety based on what can be gleaned from whatever sources on the web. I did this during the COVID era when the wildfires struck last year, and now on this oddest of days when the latest unprecedented new normal event was unfolding. Pattern. A picture of widespread chaos emerged quickly, based largely on the input of hundreds of mainly strangers. And in total, nearly 3,500 people have watched that video, and many hundreds were joining me to tell me what was happening and ask questions on that fateful morning. They responded to my hastily arranged transmission using the improvised technology of a thankfully fully charged laptop and internet connection via a mobile phone hotspot. Well done, Vodafone. Speculation understandably arose with suggestions of a cyber attack. And I think there was, I don't know if it was a legit CNN or a fake CNN story of a cyber attack. That flashed across the screens and was soon withdrawn, wasn't it? Full on apocalypse, as well as rumoring on the geographical impact, but mainly the indication of a gross electrical failure on a scale and impact unknown by any of my viewers and correspondents in their lives so far, at least in this country and its neighbour, Spain. Whilst I was on air, the family here filled the bathtub with water and checked the emergency supplies, which you may recall I wrote only a few weeks ago about that, prompted by European bureaucrats and the suggestions of disastrous happenings that may last somewhat suspiciously around 72 hours, a number which returned to this day's event as if by reticular activation. Now, I think we are being conditioned for things, and this was a little bit of a test, if you like. And this was the most remarkable and differentiating factor to me of this particular situation that day. The suggestion that whatever it was and whatever its cause, this might last for days. That was some of the early talk, wasn't it? And I'm distracted here by lycra-clad bottoms. Sorry about that if that's distracting you too on the advertising that's come up on my page here. Right, where was I? Okay, live streaming done, and now well and truly up to speed with what was happening in the bigger picture. I set about domestic preparation and response, chopping wood to power up my high-tech mini stove that would simultaneously cook lunch and charge up my battery pack via USB, whilst the pasta boiled and tins of fish were located and opened. Sardines, as I recall, in tomato sauce. None of this I needed to do, as the gas to our regular kitchen was unaffected, but it seemed a spontaneous display of alpha male capability might have a reassuring effect on my small and excited tribe of 5, my family here. More generally, as I was to discover on my bicycle some hours later, the Portuguese people, at least in my seaside town, that's here in São Martinho de Porto, where it's very foggy today, I have to say. Yeah, local people, they responded brilliantly when faced with a total blackout of unspecified duration. They realized very quickly that in nearby cafes, ice cream was melting and beer was warming up. National emergency. In a spontaneous act of civic duty and without pausing to think of the personal cost, selfless citizens fled their homes in an effort to save local cafes from commercial catastrophe, turning the seafront and beach into an impromptu continuation of the previous Friday's revolutionary celebrations. That was of course, the 25th of April. So the partying continued, basically. As I surveyed the scene, I noticed a mixture of darkened, closed shops and gas stations, petrol stations, mainly corporate, alongside others also in darkness, mainly independently owned, battling on and presumably offering credit or taking cash. It seems in the end times, the Chinese shops will be there to serve us, even if the ATMs are dark. A first for me in all my nearly 60 years. Now, I've never seen a blacked out ATM machine before. Maybe one, possibly, I guess, if it was out of order. But the ATMs of the town were dead. They were like the proverbial parrot. They were in darkness, and it was an odd and somewhat somber and sobering sight. Having assessed it as safe to do so, we spent, as a family, the rest of the afternoon on the beach, having our first dip of the year. That was cold, freezing, basically, making memory, as people would say, making a memory, and returning home in anticipation of a candlelit dinner and board games. The go-to, right, for when people find themselves in these sorts of crises. We'll talk to each other. We'll play games together. I'm pleased to say us lot coped well with our enforced digital detox and later welcomed friends from the neighbourhood who arrived just after powers was restored to share wine, cheese, and opinions on the cause and consequence of this weirdest of days. For me, this trans-peninsular outage was outrageous, and that's where I come back to the title here. That should never have happened. Yeah, absolutely. Outage, outrageous, outrageous outage. Something on this scale causing such chaos and uncertainty is utterly unacceptable in what we consider to be an advanced culture. I don't know what you think about that. The government, local and continental, were and still are left wanting. At the time of writing, I said that. I think still left wanting. I see the EU have rejected the idea of sustainable energy being the cause. There are a number of theories afoot, aren't there? I don't think we're ever going to find out. High taxes and civic participation in an assumed social contract should, to my mind, assume the absence of such immeasurable incompetence and vulnerability. How on earth can you have a whole country blacking out like that? It just does, it beggars belief to me. What we got was the result of the worst extremes of political and corporate centralization and self-interest. Again, but this time on a scale too great to forgive and forget. But we probably will. Well, we won't forgive, but I suspect we'll forget collectively as the news agenda moves on. And other things are dangled before us to drain us of our precious consciousness and concern. How many more times do we need to be on the receiving end of such contrived fallibility to realize that this toxic combination, and that toxic combination I'm referring to is the worst extremes of political and corporate centralization and self-interest. This toxic combination is lethally hostile to our long-term human survival and well-being. Society, you might call it. I will, if invited back next week. So it looks like I am invited back next week to offer some of my more usual positivity and practicality. And that I will do. I realized as I was writing this, the rant needed to be a whole column, and the solution and the light, if you like, will return in part two. And for the time being, ask your forbearance regarding my ire and negativity on this terrible matter. I'm not angry about it anymore. I wasn't that angry about it, but it sounded like an angry response. I mean, it's completely outrageous. Not that I let these sorts of things, if at all possible, trouble my countenance and calm. Yeah, terrible matter, which thankfully the people dealt with so admirably with their desenrascar, which is the Portuguese approach to situations, difficulties, challenges, just mucking in, sorting it out and dealing with it, which reminds me of when I first heard that word, or the ethic. It was, I think, a Portuguese guy saying to me, with a knife, we can do anything. But it should never have it should never have happened in the first place. And the Portuguese people who did deal with this so brilliantly should never have had to face this situation, in my view. And I see myself as one of them as a resident here. So there you go. To my mind, that should never have happened. And I will offer some a response to it that's more positive, if you like, for part two in the paper. And it's along the lines of, just to give you a little bit of a kind of semi-spoiler here. Who doesn't like a semi-spoiler first thing in the morning? It's to do with that different grid. And I think we're off grid. I think we're off grid kind of spiritually, morally, ethically, if you like. Our connection to that truly gives us life. We've got an outage of that ongoing. You know, some of us went off grid with that a long time ago, you know, in these atheistic, agnostic times. And I've no issue with people expressing themselves and their relationship to organized corporate religion, if you like. But the baby that's gone out with the bathwater, I guess, pun intended, the baby Jesus that's gone out with the bathwater is in becoming so rational and atheistic and agnostic. We have cut ourselves off from the source, which some people haven't done that, obviously. But it seems to be a minority interest or an occult or esoteric activity to be truly divinely connected and to be not experiencing an outage on that level. it appears normal and cultural and general, collectively so, that we are not connected to the grid of life-giving, life-sustaining power. Make of that what you will, call that what you will, but I think that we ignore that, we persist and perpetuate that at our cost, and our very drastic cost, which is, I think, what we're going through at the moment, to not be connected to the life-giving grid. You know, we worshipped a false prophet, a false god, didn't we, of electricity and all that it brings to us, and we found out the hell and the purgatory that comes of that particular god and that form of worship, where we're worshipping data and facts and ideas on the internet and being divided and run and ruled by them and distressed by them and possessed by them, really. That one of the upsides was, in the absence of us being falsely animated or outraged or divided by what's constantly streaming before us like this on the internet, we realized that the birds sing and the children play, the sun shines, and we were lucky to have a brief and joyous experience of that. Many people were upset and disappointed that it didn't last a little bit longer, because things were going so well for many people. Obviously, things went very badly for those dependent on electricity, who the aged, the vulnerable, and those in hospital. It was horrible for them. But for those who managed to cope quite well, who were fairly well prepared, it was perhaps a nourishing moment and a reminder of where our true power and sustenance can come from, and our over dependence on the false gods of the internet, of electricity, of how we tend to think and how we tend to be animated in our modern lives. So let me know what you think about that, and a part 2 to follow. And today, as I record this, and you know, by way of offering something tangible and practical to do with this, I'm reinstating my. Let me just take these banners off the screen so you can see what's going on here. I am reinstating my Munson's midday moment. This was a little sort of meditative moment that I was doing a few months ago that some people quite liked. And I'll do that. I'm going to do that now under the auspices of Good Morning Portugal. So at midday, I will be just pausing and inviting you to do the same and connect us to that grid of peace and calm, and that which sustains and gives us life. That's my intention. Check it out for yourself. See if that occurs for you. I think the new agey personal development, the contemporary speakers on this. I mean, this is nothing new for humanity. This is as old as the hills themselves upon which we might sit and contemplate. But at the moment, it's being called regulation, isn't it? Regulating oneself, unstressing, de-stressing, coming into the moment, being in the moment, pausing. All of those are just descriptions of the state. And the only way to realize the state is to follow a little process. And I humbly offer one to you, and I'm going to reinstate that for weekdays, midday, when the alarm goes off here it's the bomberos test signal. When that goes off, it is my sign to sit still for a moment and invite you to do the same. So join me for that in about just under 3 hours' time, and on a regular basis again for Munson's midday moment of calm and peace, if you need that sort of thing right now. Go well. If you want to connect on a more regular basis, I'm available at 8 in the morning at my desk at the Portugal Club as well. If you want to connect, if you have any issues to share about moving to or living in Portugal that are of interest or stress or difficulty, let's ground those and deal with them at the Portugal Club at 8 in the morning, where I hang out before I do these recordings. And you can connect to me via direct message there. And the article I've just read, I suspect will make it to Substack at some point. So yeah, you can hang out at the Portugal Club. Loads of other useful information and wonderful other members of the Good Morning Portugal Club community there at the Portugal Club. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Fresh content every day and recordings in the morning. And if you're a Portugal Club member, you can sit in and chat with with my correspondents, guests, and co-hosts. And now, look, Substack as well, if you want to check that out. And if you're a bit old school and you prefer a podcast, you can find me on iTunes and most other podcasting platforms as Good Morning Portugal, with these shorter segments that I think about 20 minutes. That's a little bit more manageable, isn't it, than a long live stream, which I think we used to do 2 hours of live streaming. I think this is working a little bit better. Apologies to those of you who do like to check in the morning, but you can do that, as I say, at the Portugal Club directly with me, and you can still sit in on the recordings. Sign up at theportugalclub.com and make sure you have a great day. Take care. Bye for now. Maybe see you at midday. Ciao.
In Portugal, there's a YouTube